Okay, good morning to everybody, good afternoon. In this fresh day, we are ready to restart. And also, this afternoon, we open with our friend Levan Ketaguri. The title of the intervention is Culture, Dialogue of Generations and Locations.
Thank you, Fabio, and thank you to all of staff. I think we still have time for this tomorrow, but I will just use this opportunity to organize this meeting. I'm second time in Lecce, and I always feel like at home. And it's because you all are here and you create this very nice atmosphere. When I received this invitation, I start thinking what I can tell you and how I can share with you what we are doing and how it could be related with our activities of ITI and how we can explain what we are doing. Because I think that the history of ITI in Georgia started after the collapse of Soviet Union. Because it's quite important to underline that during Soviet times there was only one office somewhere in Moscow, nobody knows where, and usually it was part of so-called Theater Workers Union. And as I remember, Georgia was only a republic who celebrated 27th March as International Theater Day without connection of the Moscow offices. It was something like independent activities by Georgian theater workers. They every year organized a TV program dedicated to Theater Day, and it's how we know about the Theater Institute in general and about the tradition of the speech, messages, and so on and so on. And after Soviet Union was collapsed, then slowly the national offices starting raising in different republics, and in Georgia we start our activities something from 95, 96. And then I think we run some project, but we have not any connection with other centers. It was something that we have connection with the Paris office, and unfortunately, starting from 2000, every month we receive just letters of condolences and just letters that the people dying in different centers, but still there was no connections. We only just find that generation who create ITI, they just dying. And then we find that in many countries already centers disappeared. And this is important to underline that it was very nice that first day we have a message from Tobias and pity that he is not here, but I related the raising and let's say the new age for ITI with Tobias and the new staff who come to national centers. I don't know what will happen with us after some time. And if we still repeat these examples of end of 90s and 2000. But why I'm telling this? Before we come to this deadline, Georgian ITI, it's still young center, but most of our activities, what we start to implement, it's most related with the future generation. We don't so much looking for already well exist and well adopted theater creators who don't need, let's say, our support, but we do this when it's necessary, and I can give already many examples of this. But what I find during these years, first, that it's very important to have direct relations between the center. because the central office can't manage everything for us. We need to have our initiatives, and we need to have our, let's say, direct relation, and this is already another reason why I am very thankful to Fabio, because several years ago, when Fabio invited European centers, this already gave us very nice opportunity to know each other face to face. And you can't create anything without knowing personally someone. Even we using all these virtual relations, still physical relation to develop something, it's still very important, because this still gave another sense. Unfortunately, we are not very close to, let's say, virtual relations which will fully imitate physical presence. But I know that scientists still working on something like this, and maybe then all these online meetings will be more sensitive and more impressive, I don't know, but still we keep this old-fashioned direct relations, because as humans we need this energetic exchange, and online this is still quite impossible. We can do this. Most of the people who working in Georgian centers, they are middle-aged generation and more young generation. But according last 20 or 30-year activities, we find that sometime if we would like to change something, and I believe that that the main philosophy of ITI when it was created after the Second World War, it was to change the world, because we find what we get is the first half of 20th century. We finished with terrible Second World War, and people would like to find some alternative, and of course it was related with hope. And hope always related with future. And it's why I think that ITI always look to the future. And we find that even if we do many projects, festivals, initiatives, we can't change exist generation. It's too difficult. Mostly in situation when you have in fact post-Soviet generation, who spend all their life in Soviet Union. They faced with collapse of it, but not too much change in the mind, because it's very strange. For example, with kind of referendum, 83% in Georgia, I mean the 83% of population, they are for Western integration and for absolutely opposite of Soviet Union. But I find that it's very difficult to change the mind. It's very difficult to change the attitude, because this might be already frightness. After some ages, people are afraid to change something. I faced this working at the university when I was responsible for reforms, and I find that there was no any single professor who would like to change something, because it's more comfortable to do same what you do on your life, and you are not ready to face with changes, because change is hard, because you need to work and you need to upgrade yourself first of all, otherwise how you can change it. And then to discuss with my colleagues, we find out that we need to change our main target group, and we need to change our target group specifically with the age group. And today, just following the presentations, when it was mentioned the children's projects in other countries and in different societies, we do this in our society. Because we find that if you didn't change the young generation, the future will be more problematic, because we still have access to them to change their mind, to give some alternative understanding of surroundings. And it's why several years ago we start with Cultural Diplomacy Academy, but for youth. And our target group was different young people, not from one location, but from different schools in capital city, and already with mixed ethnicity. And what we try to implement, we try to invite our different colleagues from different countries to give them access to meet with, let's say, so-called foreigners. Because sometimes this example to give access to have direct talk with somebody who coming from another country, who can share his experience, might be more impressive than just our stories to, let's say, our teenagers. And we faced with very interesting examples when these people from the different schools, how they became team when they start discussing very hard issues. And sometimes they discuss topic which was very difficult to imagine for us, that they can speak and talk about this, because what we try to follow, never do any preparatory work, because we don't want to have this intervention, let's say, because in Soviet traditions always target groups prepared for some programs, and then everything was happened very unnatural. It's why we try to avoid, and we try to have everything based on improvisation. And the young generations, they show up that they are more open, they are more clear in their, let's say, questions and in their opinions. And it's make us a lot of inspiration. And we find out that this not only the thing what we can do, because we already, before we start cultural diplomacy, we already have similar experiences, what was mentioned this morning, when we invite our practitioner colleagues from different countries, and we send them to the refugee camps, to different cities, and they create theater pieces, and we already manage such kind of project that after the Georgian episode, I mean the episodes in places, then we send them in different countries to meet with same age groups, but in different countries, because we need to stimulate this dialogue, not only one place, but to make more larger geography. And in parallel, of course, we're working on a different projects, and after cultural diplomacy, we come back to our, let's say, historical work, and we reopened Gurdjieff Institute in Tbilisi. For us, this was very important opportunity, not to create kind of museum, but to create, again, meeting point for the people who are interested in alternatives. Because for me, for example, to describe what is Gurdjieff's work, this is alternative for any traditional work. And alternatives can be a lot. It's why we decide that this institute and the activities of the institute, it will be not only memorizing or, let's say, memorial activities dedicated to Gurdjieff, because I believe that if he were with us, he never will fix something on one spot, and he, like always, developing things, because what is he study? He study universal compilation of different experiences. He traveling, collected knowledge, and he bring together, and then with any group he developed his experience himself. He not make, let's say, stop somewhere. His process already was live, like performing arts. It was live process, and it was a nice combination of performing arts, philosophy, esoteric, and so on and so on. And again, when we create this institute, we find out that we start working with teenagers. We create this institute, but we still something missing. And we find out that we need now to go from the city go outside, and we buy private property, big land, something like 3,000 square meters in eastern part of Georgia, which is famous with winemaking part of country. And we start working to create, let's say, international school, which must be combination of Gurdjieff ideas, but not only focused on, let's say, adults, but to focus on teenagers. And we call that this is human development and culture international school. Of course, for us, in this development, we understand harmonious development, how we can transfer some skills which we can bring from different countries, from different ethnicities, and from different cultures. And same time, we find out that what might be more important for our activities as ITI, because ITI gave us access to a lot of colleagues in different countries where we can get advices, we can get contacts, partnership to create something together. And we find out that we come to very close to the idea that we need to become institution which is mostly bridging. And we need to bridge generations, we need to bridge different professions, different interests. And we, let's say, last 1 year, we try to develop a lot of platforms where we just stimulate to meet different people, to bring them together. Because, of course, as any other centers, most of the centers, we are quite small number of people who are working. And there is no state budget, there is no fixed funding. This is anyway, this is kind of, let's say, enthusiasm, activism. But what we can implement with the activism to create such kind of platforms, to give them information, to give them possible contacts with other countries, and what is for us important, to give some knowledge which they can use in practice. And in this sense, this year, it's the first year when 2 new festivals arise. One is Movement, Physical and Dance Theater, which will be in September. And next will be Children Festival in November. This is already, let's say, still in our, let's say, philosophy. Professional festival and festival for children, because at the end we would like to link professionals and children, and at the end to have some activities where they can have this dialogue, because I find that most of the problem, and the pandemic shows this problem, that during pandemic became very clear where we have a quite big gap between reality and the state cultural policies. And we find out that there is some countries where they can deal very easily responsibility for freelancers, responsibility for the people who became unemployed during this pandemic situation, and countries where they did not care for their citizens from this field. And generally, this was quite a serious crisis for me. I mean, the mental crisis. And we find what kind of difference views in different countries and societies. And we start working already on kind of document which we call to rethink the culture, and we come closer to the idea that we need to talk about value-based society, because we find very often that we talk a lot, we do a lot, but behind all of this there is no values. And of course, sometimes more important, are these values common? And are we understand same? Because we can use same words, but the meanings might be quite different. And this is already for me opportunities that ITI have this power to create one common values with the common understandings. Then let's say, crisis like this, what we have, it's could become more easy than in some countries it's happened. And this experience, I think it's quite important because we can find out that on the one hand, this is quite comfortable to be in urban space because we have everything. And we can use quite easily facilities, we can use, let's say, international relations and funding and everything, but how the connection with rural areas? Are we be very comfortable in urban areas still thinking about the rural areas? And are we still realize that without strong rural areas, cities can't keep their strong points? And how we can balance this? And this was already for us very important, how to bring the dialogue between rural and urban areas, and how we could bring together again the generations. Because we find out that most of the problem, this is how small cities or rural areas losing young generation. For 3 years I was participant in Germany. We have quite big project. It was called We Are Europe. Mostly it was focused on East Germany, and we're traveling in different small cities, running different workshops, meeting with 3, let's say, target groups, teenagers, students, let's say, and seniors, and different, let's say, fan clubs if there is something like existing in these countries. And what surprising me that the most historical, beautiful German cities were half empty. We saw a lot of closed buildings. I mean, buildings for living, not let's say shops or some commercial places, but normal living spaces. Some of these buildings, let's say, might be part of cultural heritage. And you can already see that in such cities you saw less and less young people. In such cases you can think that this example might be quite typical for many countries, include Georgia, because we are not exception, because we faced with global processes. And in these global processes, I think performing arts as mediator, as let's say, main tool to be part of creator of dialogue between generations, between urban and rural spaces, between different interests, it might be very important, because these 2 days was very often mentioned our connection with community, and theater always part of community. In 19th century was definitions that what is difference between city and countryside. And it was kind of joke that if there is theater, it is city. And if there is no theater, it is for sure village. Because in 19th century understanding, theater was very important meeting point where was possibility to develop citizens, and the phenomena of the citizens related with urban development and urbanization in this sense very important. But how we can keep relation with the rural areas where still a lot of young people, they just grow up with idea to move, and to move to big cities, and maybe after cities to another countries. As Fabio mentioned, any migration have his positive and negative aspects. The positive, if there is development in different sense. And of course, all of this gave us feeling that the theater today have a lot of responsibilities. And it's not always related to create art, and it's not always related to create some qualitative work. Because when we talk about our mission in social problems, of our mission in community development, it's not always related to create art piece. Because in this sense we have absolutely different agenda, and sometimes only just participation is more important than the final qualitative result. It's why now everything became in a very, very, let's say, different ways, and we come back very often to rethink and to reevaluate our traditional understanding of the things. Because each of us, we quite easily can understand what is, let's say, very good production and how bad production looks, but in many cases this not became so important. More important became the process of creation, and it's not so much important when we're working with children in different places that at the end we will have best production, or the theater director must create something unique. But more unique this process. And this is what I would like to share with you, that we need to think a lot about the process. Because our relations, this is the process. Our investigation, our research, this is already process. And sometimes process itself, it's more important than the result. Because in this case, result somewhere else. It's not always, let's say, best performance. It sometimes might be best if, let's say, people who take part in this process, they became more developed, they became more creative, or let's say, we can put this, let's say, energy for their harmonious development, which gave us success that our future will be better if young generation will be better. Because when we became older, we will be dependent to this generation. And I call that this is egoistic realization, how we need to spend our time to working with this generation. We call it diplomacy, or we call it education, but I think it's more important relations. Normal human relations, which we can call cultural diplomacy, or I don't know, people diplomacy or anything, but at the end we find that people need relation, and behind this relation must be very important values. And it's why for us, based on our experience, we try to work and put our energy and knowledge into value-based society. How we can transfer our experience, our values, and how we can share with young generation some understanding to bridge them with older generation. Thank you.
Okay, I don't know, like always, how we can proceed today. I don't know if you want to give some question to Levan now, then we have, there is my intervention, and also I am in the so stupid role to present myself. That is very strange, but also as you want. If there are any question now, perhaps you can have also. We have only 2 interventions today for this. We can decide. If you have any question now, or otherwise we can continue then. Miracolo! Daniel Bausch won't take the words and the light comes on.
Levan, yeah. Thank you very much, Levan. Just a spontaneous question. How do you define today values? And how do you define, how can you, or did you find a language to explain values, your values, to the young generation?
Yeah, of course, it's quite common that values in different time and in different societies, they are changing. But same time, there is universal values. We can talking about qualitative values and universal values. Just to share, let's say, love or friendship or such kind of things, this is universal values. And any values can be shared regarding on your examples. And we need to create valuable examples for young generation. Otherwise, if we just think that what I mentioned, this is the process of didactic, it will be wrong, because I don't mean any didactical process. I mean the experience-based and experience sharing with young generation, and you need to be very clear and you can create these examples. It was not, let's say, incidentally why I mentioned the Gurdjieff Institute and why I mentioned that we try to put this institute in the center to develop this rural center where we will bring young generations from different regions, because the idea is that we need to create a lot of practical exercises regarding Gurdjieff methodology, which gave them chance to create kind of initiations. Because for our understanding, the development based to pass the different, let's say, using normal language, different examinations. But examinations not in university traditions, but examinations as initiations, because they need to go through a lot of life examples, and they need to come to the values through practical exercises and not through lectures or through, let's say, didactic. They must be part of activities what we would like to create, part of dialogue, and they need to understand their responsibility, because working last 5-6 years in this topic, I'm working with teenagers from my student time. When I entered the university, second year I go to the school to work with school children, because I already have this feeling that I need to keep this relation. Maybe this was already frightness to become older and be always with young people. You already feel more younger, but same time you have access to understand them. Without this link, it's quite dangerous that one day you realize that you understand them. And I don't believe, let's say, all the people, or let's say my colleagues who are talking that this is terrible young generation, and this is impossible. Young generation is always better than previous generation. Otherwise, there will be no development of civilization. But the problem is where we lose this access of common language, where we lose this understanding. And I think that this phenomena that, first of all, I think that the restrictions, let's say, of 16-year or 18-year, when we gave young people access to take part in, let's say, state ruling, this is already old-fashioned. Because I think we need to start listening them more earlier. Because I have a lot of examples when we bring together, let's say, 12, 13, 14 years old people, and sometimes they are talking more better than any member of parliaments in different countries, because they don't know how to lie. And this is more important, I think. And they have more access to show you true. And what they say, they never have, let's say, these double meanings. What unfortunately people get through their experience when they can say something else and thinking else, and so on and so on. It's why I think that when we're talking about these values must be based on experience and on self-examples. Otherwise, it will be not very true.
Other questions? Maybe Sketcher.
And what kind of activities do you make, especially to bridge the different generations? Do you work also on something like practical knowledge transfer from the younger to the older and vice versa? And I'm also interested to know more about these connections about urban and rural areas in relation to generations and aging and the younger people. Thank you.
What we are doing now, we are still in preparation of the new initiative. In our land, we starting to create the new type of museum. And of course, this is, let's say, not museum in real way, but what we are trying to implement, we try to train now young people from the rural areas, gave them very practical skills of photography, video recording, editing. And then this, let's say, group of young people who equipped with cameras and the other necessary equipment, they will working in their villages to find older people, because they need to create museum of the people. They need to collect stories from these people. And this will be museum when you come, you can just listen to the people, let's say, inhabitants from different villages, but all of this will be created by teenagers. And this will be growing because, let's say, the digital tools gave us chance to grow this, to make this archive. And this is for us practical experience for them, first of all, to work with older generation, to collect stories, because it will be, let's say, on the one hand storytelling, and on another hand there will be experience sharing, because the idea is that the older people, they can tell anything what they like. Even they can teach cooking or doing some handicraft. It's up to them. But this is for us, let's say, starting point, how we would like to create new type of museum, because on my point of view, we have crisis in general in museum field, because museum became, let's say, dead spaces, where we just keep collections, and sometimes when you go into museums, this became so tireful, because this is just a lot of objects, but sometimes not the same feeling, which is very important to have in museums. And we very often use word museum just to underline something very bad when we talk, let's say, this theater-like museum, or I don't know, the ballet became museum and so on. We don't have the right way, and we would like little bit change this. We would like to create this museum as the space for the people, created by the people. But in this creation, there will be dialogue between the generations.
I just want to add one experience which we have in Germany since some years, which are related to this idea of new kind of museums, and this has to do with the archives of the performing arts, especially of the freelancers. Right now there is an idea to create a network of archives of independent theaters, since the founder generation is now that old that they just disappear, and with them disappears their work. And this is now a kind of panic moment where suddenly a whole generation is starting to disappear, and this is the thing where an idea was born to say, on the one hand, it needs to secure this work, whatever it remains there as material, traces of old video recordings, which needs to be digitalized and saved and cleaned and whatever. And on the other hand, to say it's not just for collecting, it's for performing the archive, to do something with this material, to have a new view on it from the next generation, to say, let's use this, let's make a performance on this, let's have an own layer about the material, and reenactment, which could be something totally new when you just restart it from a recording, or it could be a story about a story, it could be a reflection about a certain material, and so on. So these two pillars are just carrying now a rather strong impulse to really create a new way of securing this material between the generation.
Yeah, I think that we have different examples to bring generations together, and this is depend on locations, and this is depend already the population of the locations, because last project we do, I think, months ago, when we try to implement the new type of literary festivals. We negotiated with some young writers who are quite popular in the country, already publishing houses, some magazines, and we try to organize this festival in a new way. And we go to we have city called Marneuli. We are very diverse with ethnicity, because in this city we have Azerbaijanians, Armenians, Georgians together. And according to the situation in region, I mean the war between Armenia and Azerbaijan, this is very peaceful city, because this ethnicity is living in quite peace in this country, in this city. And we decide that all our, let's say, writers, poets, they need to become hosts. And we create a lot of, let's say, tables. And in each table there was each host, like writer, and he can just meet guests and talk with them. And we really surprised that a lot of people come, and come all generations, because they not expect that there might be festival which not officially something happened on the stage and they are somewhere in the ground, but they all were in one space with a lot of locations, and they have chance to talk with people who they saw in TV or in, let's say, official meetings. And during several hours, they have chance to change the tables, but still have the direct relation. And the result really was very interesting, because, let's say, teenagers, older people, a lot of teachers from the schools. And for me it was very important that during these spontaneously, let's say, activities, they agreed about a lot of new projects with each other, and there was nobody who needs to manage it, because this is their initiatives. And this is already important for us, because when I mentioned that we would like to create platforms, and we're creating platforms, it means that we would like to create spaces where a participant can realize their initiatives and they can find each other. And this is already important when you gave access to different people to find each other. And this is one of main activities for us.
Okay. Thank you to Levan and also to the question. Also, I think that there are some elements that continues to be present in all the interventions and all the questions because everything is connected, is very clear. Now I think that we can have 10 minutes of break for your smoking time and also to have a juice also. Sounds sweet if you like. And we restart in 10 minutes, no more, please. Okay. Also, Like I have said, I have to present myself, and I am Fabio Tolledi, for someone that doesn't remember. Tolledi. The title that is always something very strange for me is Antigone's Dream, Overcoming Conflict Through Theater, but also developing some of the elements that we have considered in these 2 days that are very full of many stimulations for me, and I want to try to communicate to you what is in this moment the work that I am trying to develop in after 20 years of work in the conflict zones with our theater. I want to give first some elements that has characterized our work. The first thing is connected with a very precise dimension of the beginning of the new century, in a certain way. That is not the hand of the bipolarism of the Cold War, but also we can consider something strongly connected with the war, the real war. That started, we can consider this dimension started with the Twin Towers attack, and also connected with the terrible answer organized by United States. That is something connected with an idea and a role of the intellectual. In this moment, for me, it's very important to consider what is the role of the intellectual, and also mainly also with the theater community, connected with the role of the conflict, generally, of the intellectual. And we can discover that it's a very strong role, this one. Generally, we consider the war like something like something wrong that happened in the path of the history. Is not true, this one. The war is a continuous presence in the history of the mankind. It's not a wrong road, wrong path. It's a path of our civilization. And also, if you know very well, I think, one of the most important speech of the political dimension, that is the Clash of Civilization of Huntington, that is the base that has founded the dimension of the need of the war, generally, in the United States mainly. I have said also many other times, I have worked at university in Sociology of Religion Institute. And when I have worked at university in Sociology of Religion, all the handbook, consider the religion like something that was disappearing in a dimension that is civil dimension, not something connected with the sacred, and the fundamentalism was considered not something essential. The Clash of Civilization of Huntington considered the religion like one of the elements that can create the need of the war. And also the fundamentalism is the creation of the political speech. It's not something that exists before. It's not something that can be considered like an element of the perspective of the need of the war created and supported by someone. This dimension of Clash of Civilization, for me, is another element that can allow to us to consider what is so human and so political, the dimension of the war. The war is a tool. Also, there is a debate very interesting. We can't consider the war against terrorism like an element so usual and normal, because the war against terrorism is not a war in the classical way. It's not a war against a state and nations in front of another nations. The war to terrorism is a strategy, but it's not something that is founded politically. In the history of the historical process, generally, the war is a war of one army against another army. Also, the Clausewitz theory is very important, and also Carl Schmitt, the category of politics is something that can find a crisis in the war against the partisans, for example. That was considered not a normal dimension, an anormality. When we accept the idea of the global war against terrorism, we are changing our mind. And also the intellectual has a role very important in this aspect, because you can't do the war against an enemy that is not clear. Also, we know, many of us can remember what are the speech connected with the justification of the war and the invasion of Afghanistan, of Iraq too, the lethal weapon, and also Tony Blair that have said after 15 years, I'm sorry. This is a wonderful experience, I think, to say, I'm sorry. Was not true. But also we know generally that a war is created by a discourse, by a speech, by a cultural perspective, always. The war needs generally to be justified by a cultural dimension. Also, I want to another aspect very essential on which I think that we need to develop more and more is the concept of violence. In this moment, I think that Judith Butler is giving us a very important element to consider the dialectic between violence and non-violence one more time, because this can create a crisis of the idea of the ineludible presence of the war in the human experience. I want to read something because I needed to fix something. One of the aspects that I have found like element of the need of the war is generally the dimension of definition of the others and definition of the otherness. Generally, the dynamic of the war need to define the other like a minority, something that has to be civilized, something that has no dimension, a cultural dimension. If you remember also the war in Iraq, also Italian army has participated with the international coalition, bombed places that all the participants of the government said that there is nothing there. It's only desert. There is nothing. We can't. There is no risk to have victims. There is no risk to have civil victims. We know very well that in all the war from the last 1 century, the number of the civil victims is the huge prevalent numbers of the people that disappear are civilians always. The death of the soldiers is a minimum part nowadays of this. That continue to be a very strong contradiction. Also, in the same way, our work of Strega Teatro is more connected with some elements, because we have started with another aspect that we have found in these days, that is connected with the heritage, with the cultural heritage, with the heritage of the performing arts. And also in this direction, we have worked from the beginning of this century on the tragedy, on the level of tragedy, the dimension of tragedy. Also what you have seen the first day of Medea is a continuous direction to work on the tragedy and to work on the female role in the heritage of the performing arts. female role is not only the character, the female character, is also developing a perspective connected with the speech of the culture connected with the women. And also for this, for our work on Maria Zambrano for Antigone, the graveyard of Antigone was the first step of our path in the beginning of at 2002 we started to work. And also we are restarting to consider the need of Antigone like an element very essential of the conflict that we have, how to resist against an order that you can't share, that is not human. How can resist to the dimension of the mentality of the government that is working against the humanity? You know, in the war, in the book Walls, we have spoken about our experience in Cyprus. That is continue to be a very interesting place, and very interesting place of contradiction also, mainly by the Brexit situation, because the army of United Kingdom is present in the island, control all the railroad, and also the Republic of Cyprus is a member of European Union, and there is an army of a nation that is not in the European Union that control the main road, and also that create the separation, also maintain the separation between the occupied part of the Turkish Republic of Cyprus and the part of Greek languages of Cyprus. What is the dimension that was very important for us? We have found sense when we have started to work there, starting to work on Antigone. We have found a very important question by the people that we have met, because we were working on something that is connected with the daily life experience of everyone, the experience of civil war. This other aspect of civil war is another aspect that need something deeper, something very essential too. There is a concept in Greek tradition that is stasis. Stasis is the name of the civil war. But it's very strange. George Agamben has written something very important on this topic. This is very strange because we haven't considered civil war like an element of the heritage of human being. We consider always more comfortable the idea that the war, there is an invasion of a nation against another, but we are not able to consider the civil war like an element very important. Also, the history of Antigone is the history of the war inside the family, the same family. And we have an idea, the reason of the government against the reason of the blood, of the relationship. The history is very clear in the classical tragedy. Antigone reject the option to don't have a graveyard for the brother that was killed. In the meanwhile, the other brother that was killed with the final fight under the wall of the city will be honored with all the honor of the army and all the government and so on. But Antigone can't accept this, reject this. Also, the narrative dispositive of Maria Zambrano is very interesting because he said Antigone was buried in a graveyard but was not killed. And in the graveyard, she starts to meet all the people of her life, the mother, the father, all the brothers, and the sister. There is another reason connected with Antigone. You know that Brecht, when come back in Europe, the first performance that he has present was Antigone with the translation of Hölderlin. And there is only a dialogue at the beginning written by Brecht originally. And it's a dialogue between the two sisters that doesn't want to watch outside the window, that there is someone that is crying. And the first sister say, we have to see what happened. No one, the other says, no, stay there. It's not something interesting for us. It's risky to go outside. And at the end, the brother that is escaping by the war was buried, hanged on the wall. And one of the sisters want to cut the rope, also to give a normal death, a pity, a dimension of pity also, that is connected. The experience of war is something that creates an absolute distance by the humanity. This is very interesting, a session for us because it's connected with the female role, because we are absolutely convinced that the role of the women in the process of peace is essential, is crucial, everywhere, in every places of the world, in all the countries in which we have worked. We are very absolutely convinced that is the role of the women that can transform the society. With no rhetoric against the idea of the dimension of the minority of the women in some society. Is a problem connected with all the society all over the world. It's not something connected only with the Arabic culture, for example. That also on this we can say many other things. There is an heritage more articulated on this. And also it's very important to remember that the dimension of the definition of the others, always we are victim ourselves. We are always in this framework completely, and sometimes it's very difficult to recognize what are the common sense that we accept without awareness. One aspect of the conflict generally is connected with the construction of the enemy. The construction of enemy is characterized by some elements. One of these elements is the monolinguism. The monolinguism of the other is an aspect very essential, and also the work that we have presented, the presence of all the songs from many different traditions and countries that sometimes live together, is something essential to understand that the opportunity that we have. The example is connected with the Mediterranean area. In Mediterranean area, we have many languages, many different kind of writings, but also there are a common sense many times that can create a connection very deep. Generally, I remember that when we have started to work in Cyprus or in Greece or in Albania, someone show some places, and always someone show us a place that is connected with the Ulysses travel, the Ulysses journey. This is the Circe island, and we are in Cyprus, and this is the Circe island in Sicily. This is the church. It's not something wrong, because the connection with the places is connected with the human experience, and also is true. This is another aspect connected with the positive role of the myth. I have not a rationalist attitude in front of the myth. The myth is something connected with the poetical experience of knowledge, and also is a multiple dimensions. Is not only one, the meaning of the myth, is a multiple meanings that create the power of the myth. Sometimes when I work with the paradox, I say Jesus is a myth, and it's works in for the Armenian, for the Romans, for the Orthodox in Greece, and there are some differences because the myth is different, and in these differences can create a connection with the life of the people and can be effective. The myth, it's possible when it's effective. Otherwise, it's not a myth. It's something true, something that can work. In this last period, in our last project that was Genius Loci, we have worked a lot with the dimension of archive. And also for this, in these days, we have said many times what is the importance of archive in this moment. And I think that we need to develop more and more, and I think that this is one of the fields most important, connected with the tool that we can find to overcome the need of the violence, to overcome the need of the war, to create a sharing common knowledge, common awareness. And the archive is a very, very important tool that we can develop. The word archive is very strange because it's connected with the word arche, that is something connected with the order from one side, and also is connected with the archaeology in another hand. This connection with the arche, there is a work very important for me of Jacques Derrida, that is archive fever. What is this archive fever? It's something connected with an idea very interesting of the origin of the photography. For Derrida, there is a skigraphy, the writings of the shadow. For when we have a radiography, it's normal for us to have something to explore, something that is inside our body, but we are not able to see. This dimension of the arche is something connected with something deep, but also that create an image that we are not able to see inside. And in a certain way, there is another aspect deeply connected with the cultural heritage of performing arts, the role of the shadow, the spirit. Skigraphy is the writing of the shadow in a certain way. And when we have worked in Turkey on Karagöz and in Greece with the Karagiosis, like element, very in common, is the same figure and also is the same word. But this dimension is basically comes from one of the aspects of the ancient tradition of the theater. The shadow theater is something connected with the shamanism. It's very clear, it's very easy to understand this connection. But in the same way can create what a person with whom I have worked for many, many years, that passed 2 years ago, 3 years ago, is that in shadow theater we can find always the dance of identities that stay together. In a certain way, also in Commedia dell'arte, we can find the typology of the Venetians, the lawyer from Bologna, the lovers from Tuscany. This is a dance of identity that can find a place together on a stage. And also is an example not to dominate someone, but to allow to everyone to find a place to create a common dance. In this work that I have done on archive, another aspect very important is based on the writings of the most important author for me, that is Walter Benjamin. The concept is a German term, is Eingedenken. This dimension of Eingedenken is very essential because it's the invention of the past like an opportunity for the future. This idea is very interesting, connected with a new dimension of the archive. Also in a certain way, the experience of Aby Warburg was very strongly connected with this idea. To create a connection through the time, because always we invent our past. Also, we invent our memory, generally. It's very clear in the traumatic experience. The memory is not something fixed, it's not something precise, it's not something clear. It's always something in transformation. Also, this is an aspect that we use also for the work on dramaturgy with the actors and the actresses. We work a lot with this dimension of the transformation of memory and relationship with the memory, like a sensitive element of the creation. Generally, our work is not a work of the director, it's not a work of mine, it's a collective work. And the creative process is always connected with this connection with the memory, that is something living, but something transformative, not something fixed. This is particularly important when we work in a context of conflict in which the experiences are very, very strong for all the participants. But we have to find the creative process to transform this opportunity like an element that can transform the condition in the dimension that can transform the connection of our memory. Otherwise, start to be only an obstacle that it's impossible to overcome. I have said we know that when we have worked in the project HOST, was an acronym, Hospitality, Otherness, Society and Theater. The word host is something, is a contradiction generally, because it's to host is to create the hospitality, but also is the root of the word hostility also. Is the Latin word that is connected with this host, hostess, is the host, but also is the enemy. And also this ambiguity is connected with a dimension in which I have to say very clearly, in Italy, the presence of the new fascism is very strong from quite 30 years until now. The Lega, in which there are a member now in the actual government, we have a history of new fascism from 30 years that is a very long period in which the poison of the dimension of the conflict is very strong, is a poison that is very present. We are not, and also we can't consider that we are the democratic, we are so ready to resist against, no, because this speech is continuously present every day. And also the condition of the migrants here, to debate about the citizenship, for example, for the people that grow up here, is something that also there is a debate until now in this moment, because during the Olympic Games many athletes won the medal but were son of migrants or refugees too, but someone said, oh, the citizenship is a normal thing to give to someone, but it's a normal thing to give to children that study at school, at high school, at university. No, they are not able to have a citizenship until 18 years here in Italy. There is no sense of this. And also is the result of this presence of the fascism, and also is something connected with the lack of responsibility to front the experience of the fascism in Italy. Fascism was born in Italy, and also in '38 the law against the Manifesto della Razza is a text very interesting to listen, to know, and also is something that is at the base to justify the intervention of Italy in the war in Africa, in Ethiopia, Somalia and Libya, in the Balkan area. I have found something very interesting. I have said yesterday, I have written something on Balkanism and Balkanization, because Italy has ever front this aspect of the responsibility during the 40s. And is a I want to say something very shortly, but very interesting with this dimension of the responsibility of the intellectual. There is a formula that is Italiani brava gente, that also many say that in Russia, during the Russian campaign of Nazi fascism, the Italian was a good man, and also in the Balkan now they are good men. But also I have found that the nickname of Italian was the people that burn the house. Is a big contradiction. But the most important things to understand is the idea of superiority that justify the war. And this is a cultural process. The idea of superiority is connected with the idea of the Balkan people with no civilization, and it's possible to have an invasion. There is a little contradiction because the queen, the wife of the king of Italy, comes from Montenegro, and also for this, during the Second World War, the Montenegro was annexed, not invaded by Italian army. Also, Croatia was annexed, not invaded, because it was a right to say, no, this is our land because we are superior, because the Roman give us the authority, and the authority of the civilization, one more time. Also, I want to say that it's very important to discover and develop the responsibility of the intellectual, the responsibility of all the speeches that can also promote, sometimes not in a very with awareness on this process. But I think that in this sense it's very important to recover another aspect very essential on the tragedy tradition. In these last 20 years there is a new vision of the role of the choir in the tragedy. The dimension of the 18th and 19th century perspective give to the choir not an important role. It's a role of description, of the didascalic role. Is not true. It's a perspective of the German philologists that create this dimension of the protagonist and antagonist, and then the choir is a description. No, the studies of Louraud, one of the most important studies for me, for our work on the choir, give us a dimension that the choir is the main role of the tragedy because it's the voice of the community. And in this sense, we can find a perspective very interesting. There is a technical aspect on this. When we have to realize a choir, we need a quality of listening. Now, you have said, Daniel says the importance of listening. Yes, it's impossible to have a choir without listening. You have to be able to listen the voice of everyone, and your voice is one voice inside the other. And this is the political perspective too. The choir, it's possible if there is a multiplicity that is able to give the voice really to a unique body, that is the body of the community. Also in this sense, the choir is the center of the tragedy. Of course, we have a memory transformative of the tragedy. Is very little the experience that we can find in a very well-based element. We don't know exactly what is the classical tragedy. We can only transform in the artistic form of the contemporary. We are living artists. We are not able to to give an idea of something that is archaeological. It is not a museum, this one. An essential difference is that when we work, we try always to work on the mother tongue of all the participants. And also for this is a long work generally when we go in somewhere to work, because it's very important to find the based experience of the mother tongue of all the participants, of the actors and actresses. This can create a dimension also of connection very deep and can give to the choir the multiplicity. That is the living sense of theater. And okay, I stop here. Okay, thank you. Okay. Facciamo un'altra pausa. Non so se of course I'm working a lot with this new the new phase of our work on conflict, and also I hope that for the end of the year I finish the work. For example, I want to add something. I think that it's very important to create a deep sight inside of the Augusto Boal experience and the importance and the relevance in African countries of the work of Augusto Boal. I think that there is another aspect very important in the Shakespeare tradition, the connection of the war and the conflict for the power in Shakespeare is something very important that create a repertoire very essential that is used all over the world continuously until now. And also there are other aspects that I want to develop. Also, I have found many materials very interesting about the experience of Berliner ensemble, like an experience of Cold War. It's very interesting. There is a book very strong of Routledge on this, but also I have found many very interesting dimension, because now we are living a different historical phase. I'm sure on this. The dimension that started with the Twin Towers and the global war, the global conflict is a new dimension that we have to consider in a different way. And also for this, perhaps we can find another opportunity with the theater in conflict zones to transform this. Okay. I don't know if you have some questions, observations, or... Va bene.
We are speechless. No, there were so many aspects, so that's quite difficult to find a point where to attack. But I have so one question is this, and I would like to have a clarification about you were talking about to identify a clear image of your enemy. Of this tool. I don't know if it's a tool. And then I would like to, I'm totally d'accord with you that women are the only one who can transform society, but I would like to know why. I'm d'accord. I have no, but I would like to understand it to be able to. I have a feeling, and I'm totally d'accord, but maybe you find the right...
Okay, for the second question, I prefer that Roberto or some women can answer better, otherwise it's not... I can say something about the first question. Is there is generally, I think that is something connected with the Orientalism process. There is a generalization of the enemy, or the enemy. It's clear, for the Italian situation, the enemy is also the migrants, the gypsies, from the North Italy, the southern, and so on. There is a generalization. And I was born in Milan, and also I can recognize suddenly when some tourist comes from North Italy and start to produce this very, very old process of generalization. You do in this way. Very strange question, and generally, because there is a generalization, like an element that is connected with the monolinguism, the idea of a barbarian generally. For the ancient Greek, barbarian is the man that is not able to speak, but in a very rationalistic way, that men or women are speaking another language. Is not unable to speak. This is a process of generalization that creates always a dimension that is connected with reject to know the other. The otherness is an experience closed. In Ost project, we have used a lot the words of one of the most interesting poets for me, that is Edmond Jabès, that was a French born in Egypt, Jewish, and he has written something that for one of the titles extraordinary is the hospitality of the tongue. That the language has an opportunity extraordinary to give sense to the life. For example, when we work, you know that until COVID, we have always many different countries, the provenience of the actors and actresses. And generally, when we start to work on something, I ask, but how do you say in your language this keyword of the work? And when we work with Amado, that is Burkinabe, he says, what language? Because in Burkina they have 120 languages. And this is a very interesting observation, because the language is not only one, and also the language is always connected to the civilization process, and the civilization process is always a process very violent. It's not so connected with dimensions. And generally we need a generalization of the enemy, because the enemy, like Alexander Stilmark has worked now, is the unknown enemies. Because if I start to know someone, it's start to be very difficult to create an enemy. If I start to know someone, it's very difficult to make war. I can found the war against someone that is unknown. Otherwise, doesn't work this dimension. Sorry, please.
The first, but more of the second question. But is it possible you can translate it, because I want to be very precise? Yeah? Okay. Thanks. So we traveled into a war zone in Shengal, and the genocide on the Yazidi people was 3 years ago, and you smelled still blood. With us, I'm trying to see, but let's see, it's good to have you. And we was a group, women and men, and in the group was a man, very intellectual, in a high position, and he was first time in the Middle East, and whatever he saw, he could, also er hatte sofort analysiert und verarbeitet.
Given an analysis and was very clear about everything he saw.
So, und wir waren in dem Gebiet, wir waren eingeladen von den Fraueneinheiten, von den kurdischen Fraueneinheiten, die Schengal mit befreit hatten.
They were invited by the Kurdish brigades, women brigades, who liberated Schengal.
Und dann sind wir in ein Dorf gefahren, in Kocho. Das Dorf ist komplett vom IS zerstört, beziehungsweise die männlichen Dorfbewohner alle erschossen und die weiblichen Dorfbewohnerinnen alle versklavt worden.
And they went to a village nearby, which has been totally destroyed by the IS. So every male inhabitants were shot, and every woman were slaved or raped.
And then this person, he got silence. And we were there for 2 hours, and we traveled back to our point where we were living. It was a point of women, and there were also some men, some comrades. And they asked us, so how was it? And we were talking a bit about, and the person, he didn't say nothing, but usually he was speaking a lot. And then one of the women say, hey, what's wrong with you? And he said, I can't speak anymore. And after 2 hours, he said, yes, I want to say something. So, und dann sagte er, mein Vater ist im Krieg groß geworden in Deutschland. Und mein Großvater hat viel erzählt, früher vom Krieg. Und er war in Russland.
And then he told, my father was in the war, and my grandfather told a lot of stories from his first war, and he was in Russia.
Und er hat davon erzählt, der Großvater, und daran hat er sich sehr gut erinnert, wie er davon erzählt hat, wie sie Dörfer verbrannt haben und also den ganzen deutschen Feldzug durch Russland.
And he told about the German crusade through Russia, where they just eliminated many villages.
Und unser Begleiter hat sich als Antikriegsmensch verstanden, und dann hat er gesagt, als ich heute Kocho gesehen habe, habe ich plötzlich gemerkt, dass ich nicht geschützt bin vor einem Blutrausch. Ich kann nicht sagen, wenn ich auch hier als junger Mann oder als älterer Mann gewesen wäre, ob ich nicht mitgemacht hätte in diesem Blutrausch gegen die esidische Bevölkerung.
And this person said that he first time in his life was not sure about his own position. He was very clear that he was an anti-war person, and when he saw this village and he remembers his own history and his father's, that he said, first time I was not sure that if I have been a soldier in this war, that I would not have been a part of this destruction and would do the same cruelties like the soldiers there.
Und also der Rausch ist wichtig, also in diesen Rausch von Zerstörung zu kommen.
He said he could suddenly imagine that it could be a rush of destruction in this situation.
Und dann hat er gesagt, und ich merke zum ersten Mal in meinem Leben, dass das ganz viel mit meiner Identität als Mann zu tun hat.
And he said that he first time experiences that this has a lot to do with his identity as male.
Und dann ist ein anderer kurdischer Kämpfer aufgestanden und hat gesagt, ich verstehe genau, was du meinst, das war für mich auch die Auseinandersetzung, und hat ihn in den Arm genommen, und die 2 Männer standen dort und haben beide geweint.
And then a fighter, a man from the Kurdish army, stood up and said, I absolutely know, and I understood what you mean. And then these two men just embraced each other and they wept.
Und ich erzähle das, weil ich glaube, dass wirklich in den kurdischen Gebieten eine Kraft da ist, wo die Frauen sich eine Kraft zurückerobert haben, die zukunftsweisend ist. Ich sage nicht 1:1 für uns, aber wie von Grund auf daran gearbeitet wird, wirklich die patriarchalen Strukturen zu durchbrechen und Eigenes zu kreieren, das ist großartig.
It is that in the Kurdish areas there is such an enormous change of the patriarchic structure that the women regathered the position of men, and it could be an example, not one-to-one for us, but there is an enormous potential for it.
For women and for men also, and it was like this discussion there. It was like a tragedy from the old Greeks. Maybe it's an answer, but I think there is women have maybe not all, of course, but maybe there are still a bit more related with the earth, we saw it in Medea, for example. So, and I think there is a power, and when we can recognize this, there is a potential. Yes, there is. Thank you.
Just to connect this, I had an experience in Khartoum at that time where they made a conference about culture of peace, which sounds somehow common, but after 30 years of war, they started with a lecture from a musician, a musicologist from Sudan, who just worked many years on music, songs, and folk songs in that area. And then he started to make an experiment, to said, well, I just play you the following song, and he just played a certain song which has a nice rhythm and so on and so forth, and everybody was so. And then another song which was easier, smaller, and he just said it's about the attraction of war and the cultural connection to it. So the war song, which was the first one, was very clear for everybody, the more attractive one. So everybody could identify with it. It has a strong rhythm, it was somehow optimistic and so on. And the peace song was much more difficult for reception. It was a bit boring, a bit not so attractive, and so on. And he said we have to start here on the change of the attraction of the war culture to the peace culture. This is very essential as a thing which is so deeply in everybody that it takes a long effort to really change this to another pattern and another way of storytelling.
Okay, just to add something about the question of Daniel, I think
puoi girare proprio così, se no poi mi dicono che non dico a nessuno se ti giri.
C'è la telecamera.
Che parla adesso a me.
I personally, what I feel it is something very much related to a culture of the care. I'm speaking about from the woman perspective, the perspective of giving birth, of taking care, of crying the dead. This is my horizon of culture as a woman, so I can tell this. Of course, for me, there is not a conflict between the female dimension and the male dimension as far as we share this horizon of values of care, of respect of the life. So it is much connected to the respect of life. It is also connected to a different experience of the power and of the war itself. I think very deeply and historically also rooted in the male experience. But to go to a more inner core, this is my feeling of the respect of life.
Thanks a lot for your comments, and listening to you, I feel also like touched as a man, and I'm raising two boys. They are 11 and 13 now, and from the beginning our communication is very physical, so we are fighting, and it is kind of in them, and it's also in me, and our connection is fighting. It's also fighting, it's also searching for love and for respect, but that is how we connect, physical fighting. And what I see with other families which have girls, that the girls, they have much more capacity for empathy, like going and feeling for somebody else, or into somebody, looking into somebody else, and having this capacity of listening. My boys, they don't have this so much. I mean, I don't know. And it's very placative now, and maybe it's a little bit, it's also only my story now, but yeah, somehow it touched me a lot, this this discourse, and I think it's very connected to who we are in society and also who we are as an artist. So please, Anina.
The awareness of power, I think it's totally important. So there is the connecting by war, which I was, which I told, but there is the society, and I think, of course, they are different, but it's the society who makes female and male, huh? And I think we have, it's so placative, fighting boys, and the women are more social or whatever. Really, I think we have to have a big awareness about how we grow up, how is the society, the politicals. So women are not geschützt, protected to be same powerful as men. Of course not, but they have the experience of give birth, of take care, but there is the possibility for men also not to bring a kid on the world, of course not, huh? But to the whole gender discussion, for example, I think, and when you go in other countries, really it's, yeah, I think a big awareness of the of the sociology, huh? So, yeah. So.
I just want to add a little part. I do agree that social dimension is important and it's very strong, but there is, I'm sorry, but there is biology that is directing as well, because this, what you are saying about fighting with boys, I was raised, I have older brother, and we were raised in the same family, for example, with same parents, you know, and we had completely different communication with parents because they fought, and my father never fought with me because it was different energy. So it's not about them changing their their approach towards me only is our approach towards them. So there is a part of this biology difference that we actually created into these connections. You know, it's not only that they are imposing the social dimension on us, dividing us on boys and girls. It's mutual, it's exchange. So I think we created these connections. So I think there are both elements very important, but I can't give one, you know, importance over other, at least in my vision of this topic.
Yeah, but the patriarchal system is so many hundred or 1,000 years old, and the impact is enormously. Of course, there's a difference. Of course, huh? That's not the point. But the only point I want to say, it's really we have to have a big awareness about the patriarchal power, and it's created over 1,000 years. That's not.
I think we need to have clear understanding. With anthropological research, patriarchate, it's only 1/10 of the history of civilization, and the 9/10 was matriarchate. Yeah, which means that we need just to rethink what's happened. Why matriarchate gave power to patriarchate, and as Fabio mentioned, mythological dimensions, and in Bible there is quite clear. And if we do right understanding why Eva gave apple to the man, this is just giving some knowledge, because apple, this is case of get knowledge. And this is a lot of layers, and this is not only biology, and this is not only just 100 years of patriarchate, this is more deeper. And this is, we can say, this is kind of battle of archetypes. And this battle of archetypes, it's the roles are changing. And in all these role games, there is a kind of it's too complicated to talk in a few words, because I agree with Fabio with all these definitions, because anytime when we come to this mythological paradigm, we're reading it upon the context, and each time the context are changing, but still behind there is universal regulations which always exist and always right. It's why there is time when society leaded by women, and time when leaded by men. But we can say that this is right. This is all, let's say, changing dialogue of, let's say, leaders, and this is very long experience, female experience. And we need to realize why they deliver this power to the men. What's happened there? And was this peaceful delivering, or was violence? We don't know. But of course, there is a very long experience and knowledge behind, let's say, female power. Already through religions, through different mythologies, we can find what is balance between God and goddess, and how they balanced, let's say, pantheons, and so on and so on. I think this is a quite big topic for discourse. And
I also no. I want to. I would like to say just two little things. One, again, about the Levan intervention. I think that mythology is a discipline that was born in 17th century. The myth is another thing. The mythology is a logo about myth that is a civilization of the myth, a domestication of the myth. Is another aspect. Myth is another element. Also, another aspect very important of our work that we have found also in the intervention of Yaroslav is connected with the work on the funeral song of the mourning, that also it's very important the female role on this is something very present in all Mediterranean area. And also when we have started to work all over the Mediterranean area, we have started to collect different funeral songs, and we have in this area a funeral song. The term is morologia, in Greek mirologia is the same word, but also when was the instrument to work on the living tradition of the theater, of the tragedy, because the prosody of the funeral song is connected with the rhythm of Aeschylus' tragedy. And was something present for us more than the translation of the fragments that was found by the researcher. It's not an experience connected with the text, the presence of tragedy. It's something connected with a ritual deeply connected in a tradition. Very clear. For example, there is something very strange that we have found. For example, I have translated in mother tongue the Songs of Song, but also I have translated the Coelet, the Ecclesiastes. There are wisdom book of the Bible, this one, but in the Ecclesiastes you can find some words that I have found in a funeral song deeply popular. This is very strange because it's not it's not a folk song. It's something connected with the popular tradition that is able to sing some verses of the wisdom text of Bible. It's a deep connection, this one, and also this is connected with the women ritual, this one. And also there is an aspect very clear connected with the sound, with the verse, and this is, for us was very important to find this. We have collected some funeral song in Greece, in Cyprus, in Albania, in Syria, in Jordan, in Iraq too. We have always asked, do you have funeral song? And many times it was very difficult to have an answer on this, because it's a forbidden topic. It's not something on which you can, for example, I have asked when we were in Syria, and someone has given us, but I have asked, can you sing this song during a performance? And they say, no. We need a corpse near to sing this song. We need a dead body. And with no death, it's forbidden to sing this song. But it's not forbidden by the law. It's forbidden because the ritual doesn't allow to do this. And also, this also introduces another aspect is about the anthropological tourism. That is a risk that sometimes we have to consider, because you know, this area, yesterday we have played the tamburo that is connected deeply with the ritual very important of possession, because here the Tarantism, the Dionysiac ritual was very present, and there are many documentaries of anthropologists, and also many people of theater arrives in this area to discover the root of theater. When I have worked with Grotowski asked me many things about it, because we lived here, and also we use the tamburo. There are something very deeply connected there. And also it's a very important opportunity, yes, but also the ritual that is celebrated in the night between 28 and 29 of June of St. Paul, with the procession, with the pilgrimage, and so on, is if you want to see a collection of video camera, and you can go there, because there is a very huge number of people that is trying to do the anthropological tourism. And this is another aspect very interesting, because it's another aspect of the dynamic of conflict, the creation of the typology of the. Sometimes we create in an orientalistic way the idea of the sauvage, of the le bon sauvage, this, and also is a risk that we have to consider generally, because it's a risk that we can live in this ambiguity also, and also we have to consider this like an aspect to have awareness, to enter in contact with something that is material, important, living, and not something that can be used like a new merchandising of something, no? Ok, basta. Parlo più. I think that if there are no more questions or observations, we can stop our meeting, our fourth session. Thank you very much, and I hope that I can give you very soon the final result of my work on conflict, on some base of the conflict that for me it's very important, this work in this moment. I need, after quite 20 years of work, we need to change in a certain way, or to make a point, and also to consider many other opportunities of this. Unfortunately, the war continues all over the world, and we need to work a lot on this. It's very important. But also, one thing that I repeat many times, also like the social theater for me is not a social intervention. My schizophrenic dimension, I am a sociologist too, but I don't think that I have to do a social intervention with, when I want to work in the connection between theater and society. And social theater is an aesthetic choice for me, very precise. An aesthetic choice, a deep need that I have to give sense to my work in theater. Okay, thank you very much. At 8 o'clock start the performance of Amado.